So thank you all for joining us today. My name is Danielle Snowflack, and I am the Director of Education, Professional Development, and Outreach at the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, or ASBMB. The ASBMB is a nonprofit scientific and educational organization with over 12,000 members worldwide. Founded in 1906, the society is based in Rockville, Maryland, and publishes the Journal of Biological Chemistry, Molecular and Cellular Proteomics, and the Journal of Lipid Research. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Mentoring Matters, hosted by the ASBMB Education and Professional Development Committee. If you are having problems connecting to the webinar audio through your computer, you can connect via phone at the number in the dialog window. If you connect via phone, you must mute your phone throughout the entirety of the webinar. All phone users can be heard within the webinar suite, and you'll have extreme difficulty delivering the webinar to all participants if we have background noise. Before we get started with introductions, I'd like to introduce you to a very important feature in the webinar room, the chat box. Throughout the presentation today, we'll be accepting questions and sharing resources. You can submit a question through the Q&A box at the bottom right of the screen. In the interest of time, we will hold questions until the end of the webinar. At this time, the panelists will answer previously submitted questions as well as new questions at the conclusion of the presentation. With that, let's get started. Mentoring, broadly defined, is a partnership between an individual with extensive knowledge in a field and an individual who wants to learn. For many of us, the obvious person we think of is our research mentor, who may guide us through our graduate or postdoctoral training. However, mentoring relationships exist to support us outside the lab as well, whether they offer to train us for grantsmanship, career development, or scientific communication. Our first panelist is Dr. June Oshiro, who is an editor in the section of scientific publications at the Mayo Clinic. She's also a member of the ASBMB Education and Professional Development Committee, serving on the grad student and postdoc committee. June, would you like to provide a welcome on behalf of the ASBMB and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. On behalf of the Education and Professional Development Committee of the ASBMB, I welcome all of you to today's webinar. I'm so glad that we have some terrific speakers here today, people who have accomplished a lot and have a lot of experience in mentoring. I hope everyone is as excited as I am to hear what they have to say. A little bit about me. Briefly, I did my undergraduate at the University of Chicago. I did research in the laboratory of Dr. Douglas Bishop. I did my master's and PhD at Rutgers University in the laboratory of Dr. George Carman. I started a postdoc at Harvard University in the laboratory of Dr. Ollie Rando when the opportunity for a really interesting but total career change showed up. So I put down my pipette pen at that point, and I joined Mayo Clinic as a medical editor. At Mayo, I have edited and sometimes rewritten research papers and grant applications for basic, clinical, and translational researchers. And I've also edited medical textbooks for the Mayo Clinic Scientific Press. Briefly, the mentoring story I was asked to share. Like I said, I had a huge career change when I came to Mayo. At that point in time, I knew science, and I thought I knew technical communication pretty well, but I knew almost nothing about editing or medical publishing. Jane Wiggs, who is now an emeritus editor, was my first mentor at Mayo, and in addition to teaching me foundational editing skills, she also very patiently answered about 1 million questions that I had and encouraged me to challenge the routines and told me what to expect from authors and Mayo culture and so on. She really helped me get grounded in the field and in the specific job, and so I owe her a huge debt. And plus she was honest and kind of a self-described curmudgeon, but she was also hilarious, so she was a fantastic person to vet some of my wilder ideas. And it was great getting started with someone like her having my back.
Thank you so much. I love hearing stories about what differences mentoring made for individuals through their training, and I hope we'll have a lot of those great stories to share today. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Adela Cota-Gomez, who is an associate professor in the Department of Medicine, Division of Pulmonary Sciences at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. Adela?
Thank you, Danielle, for that introduction. I want to share a little bit about my story, how I got here, and focusing mostly on how my mentors have really shaped my path. I went to undergrad at the University of California at Riverside. I actually was on a pre-med path when I first started, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as I go through my story here. And then I went to get my PhD at the University of Colorado, actually here at UC the Health Sciences Center, and I was in the microbiology department and worked with Dr. Michael Vassell on Pseudomonas aeruginosa, very sort of basic pathogenesis of Pseudomonas aeruginosa. And then I went to do my postdoctoral fellowship at the Webb Waring Institute for Antioxidant Research. Kind of wanted to focus more now on the host and the host's response to pathogens. So I made that switch. And then I kind of took a little bit of a side path and went to do a teaching, a 3-year teaching position. And then I came back to a full-time research position here at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. And that was 8 years ago. And I'm in the Department of Medicine, which is obviously a clinical department, but I'm a PhD in the Department of Medicine doing research. And that's a really unique perspective as well. So I'll share a little bit more about that. I'll tell you, thinking back on it, as I was living this path that I was on, I always thought that the path that I was taking was the exception rather than the rule. And really what I mean by that is that I always thought that I was doing it wrong. Other people seemed to have it all figured out, and they knew where they wanted to go, and they knew how to get there. And I was always making turns and making what looked to me like corrections to my path. And then thinking back on it, I realized that my mentors were instrumental in steering me along those turns and those corrections. And I realized that those turns and corrections were not actually because of mistakes that I was making, and I wasn't adjusting for mistakes. That's how it's supposed to be. And that's exactly what mentors are supposed to do for you. They're supposed to steer you along the path. And I want to give you a couple of examples of those experiences that I had. The first one is actually when I was in undergrad. I told you that I was on a pre-med path. And so when I went to college, I was doing all the things, that you do to go and be a doctor. And at some point along the way, I realized that I was not going to be happy being a doctor. That career didn't seem to really be what was best for me. And that's a really scary realization. If any undergrads out there are listening, I think that some of you might sort of be able to understand where I'm coming from, is that when you have wanted to be an MD all your life, a doctor, suddenly you realize that's not for you. It's a really scary thought. Not only are you feel like you're giving up on your dreams, but you also think, now what am I going to do? If I'm not going to be an MD, what am I going to do? And that's a really scary situation to be in. Luckily, I had a career advisor who became my mentor then at that point. And with his help and his mentoring, I was able to explore other possibilities, and I was able to even experience other possibilities to the point that I was able to choose one of those. And I decided that research was for me. I did some research experiences, and I loved it. And so with his steering me to the path towards science and research, I decided to get a PhD, and that's the path I've now been on. So that's one example. The other example is when I was a postdoc, I became pregnant and had a baby. And I think a lot of people can also identify with this experience, is when you have a baby, especially when you're a woman on the career path and you're having a baby, you suddenly realize, you suddenly think, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be with my child. I want to raise my child and be there for them all the time. And I can't have a successful career and be a successful mother at the same time. And so luckily I had an excellent mentor who was a female who had 2 daughters of her own and had probably had the similar experience. And again, with her mentorship steering me and helping me to see that those 2 things were not mutually exclusive. I could do both. I had both the skills and the personality traits that were required to do both, and also I had the support systems to be able to do both. So in thinking about those experiences, I come back to this idea that my path was the exception rather than the rule. I used to think that those pivotal points in my path were always driven by me realizing that I shouldn't be doing something. instead of me realizing what I should be doing. In other words, I was focusing on the negative side of that equation. I shouldn't be a doctor. I wasn't cut out to be a doctor. I shouldn't be a scientist because I should be a mother. And then what I see is that my mentors helped me to see the other side. So it was with my mentors' help that I realized I could do those things rather than realize that I couldn't do the other thing. So I think if I had to identify one best way that my mentors have helped me is exactly to see the other side. And in a nutshell, that's what I think mentoring is. That's all.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Adela. I think a lot of people will really relate to those stories. Marianne, let's try your audio now to make sure that we can hear you okay. If you try speaking, I want to make sure we can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. Fantastic.
Can you hear me?
We will edit this out later.
Can you hear me now?
It's time for the introduction. So thank you so much, Adela, for your story. Next, yes, you sound okay.
Is it okay?
Next, I'd like to introduce Marianne Mallier, who is the editor of scientific publications at the Mayo Clinic, as well as an assistant professor in biomedical communications at the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine and Science. Marianne?
Hello, everyone. I am a board certified editor and writer.
Hello,
and
everyone.
I've been working in the
I am a board
Marianne,
certified
we have
editor
having
and
begun my
writer, and I've
career first as a teacher.
After having begun my career first as a teacher.
You're echoing a little bit.
Lag?
So either turn off your microphone or mute your conference line.
Is it a lag?
Try again. Sorry. Yes, much better. Thank you.
Is it better? I'm a board certified medical writer. I've been working in the field for 40 years. I started out as a teacher, and then I went to a research laboratory. I've been involved in mentoring students and peers for most of my career. First as head of scientific publications at the Texas Heart Institute and as a faculty member at the University of Texas School of Public Health in Houston, Texas. In my teaching roles at Mayo Clinic's medical school and in their graduate programs. And as an active member, workshop leader, mentor, and former president of the American Medical Writers Association. I was very lucky to have as my first career mentor a famous heart surgeon whose guidance helped me transition from work in a lab to work as a medical writer and editor. He encouraged me to challenge myself every day, to take on what I didn't know or what I didn't think I could do, to have the courage to fail, to ask for help when I needed it, and to get the education I needed to continually improve my skill set. That advice and his support gave me the perspective and tools that I needed to be successful.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And finally, we have Dr. David Wetter, professor of dermatology at the Mayo Clinic. David?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a faculty dermatologist here at Mayo Clinic, and I'm originally from the St. Louis, Missouri area. I moved up to cold Minnesota in 2000 to attend Mayo Medical School, and I have not left since, completing all my training up here. And I'm blessed to have the opportunity to mentor and be mentored by dermatology residents, medical students, and my colleagues every day in my clinical practice. A few broad areas in which my mentors helped me would be, first, my mentors modeled career paths for me which were personally fulfilling and intellectually stimulating. Secondly, they always provided tangible guidance to me and connections to help me achieve my goals. And finally, they encouraged me and inspired within me self-confidence that I could be a successful dermatologist and I could pursue the three shields of Mayo Clinic: patient care, education, and research.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you so much to all of the panelists for joining us today. With this, I'd like to turn the discussion over to the panel. Each panelist will provide their perspective on mentoring, share their stories, and provide some advice along the way. So we'll start with Marianne.
Thank you. I'm also very glad to be here today. So one of the things that I get asked a lot by scientists is how they can improve their writing, or in some cases how they can actually make the transition from a career in the lab to a career in scientific writing, which is what I did. They ask me how they can find a mentor to help guide them. Although you can certainly look among your professors and colleagues, they may not be the best members for skill sets outside their field.
Consider joining a professional association whose members could provide the specific skills that you lack. Most professional associations have webinars, they have local in-person events, courses, journals. People who participate in these kinds of activities are all going to be potential members. Nearly all professional associations also have blogs and online networking. Engage people in the blogs until your name gets known. I've found that many senior people participate, and in my professional organization, the American Medical Writers Association, these are the experienced people who truly enjoy mentoring. If you find someone of interest, contact that person offline. Check the conference programs for members who are speaking in the areas in which you're weak. If you can go to conferences, go and meet them. If you want to improve your skills in an area where you don't have contacts, you will absolutely need to get involved. And certainly becoming involved with people who can further your career in a way that someone in your field might not be will be of tremendous value. You can also find courses in the field that you want to learn more about. For example, the University of Chicago has a week-long course in scientific writing. You may very well find a mentor on that faculty. And of course, mind your social media contacts. An advanced people search on LinkedIn, for example, could lead you to a potential member. You could search for someone from your alma mater. You could also search for someone in your area to connect with somebody nearby. Then, once you've found a good candidate, no matter how you found them, you must send them a message, obviously, and get them interested in mentoring. You would be surprised at how many people are going to say yes to your query. Then you'll want to establish and manage expectations. I always say be very specific about what you want so you don't waste anyone's time. Set management expectations, set time expectations, and definitely keep the lines of communication open. You have to be upfront and honest with your mentor. And mentors, you need to be upfront and honest with mentees. I also always say to please show your gratitude. Make that relationship reciprocal by serving as a source of information and support for your mentor in some way. For example, I've mentored lots of scientists who have in turn helped me by explaining complex topics that were way beyond my level of knowledge. Right now, I have a statistics mentor who will explain anything I don't understand in a paper I'm working on. In return, I review the books and papers he writes. Finally, always be very positive in the relationship as either the mentee or the mentor.
All right, thank you so much, Marianne. Next, we're going to move to Adela.
Hi, yes, I agree. I mean, I'm probably going to touch on a little bit also of what Marianne just said. So one of the questions that I work with undergrad students and grad students and postdocs at all levels, and one of the questions that always comes up when I have conversations with them is just exactly how do I go about identifying a good mentor? And you know, that's a loaded question because there isn't any one way. There are good practices, and that's, you know, what we can start from. But you kind of figure it out as you go. But in general, some of the things that you always should be doing is that you should really be putting a lot of thought into it, right? So I think now we're starting to realize that we can have more than one type of mentor. We used to think of the mentor as that research mentor. And really what I tell my students now is every professional that you meet could potentially be your mentor. It's how you approach that relationship with them. You know, that could turn it into a mentorship relationship. But you want to be thoughtful about it. What kinds of mentors do I need? You know, do I need a research mentor? Do I need a career mentor? In what area do I need to be mentored in? And I always say there's not too many mentors. You can never have too many mentors. And so when you are thinking about, I would like a mentor in this area, I would like a mentor in my writing or in my oral presentation style, you really want to be thoughtful about that and realize that this is what I want. And then you need to start looking for mentors. Or you need to do your homework. You know, you need to go find out who is a good mentor in that area, which means you have to research them. And one of the most important resources in doing that process is talking to other mentees, previous mentees, and where they are, how, essentially grilling them on how was your experience with this mentor. And don't be shy to do that. I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I find mentees make is they're shy about it. They're shy about the process, and they almost feel like, that it's a one-sided relationship. The mentor is the most important part of the relationship, and that's really not true. The mentee should be contributing, as Marianne said, setting expectations, should be clear about those expectations and not be shy about putting those out there. When you go talk to a mentor, you really should ask tough questions of the mentor. It's okay to do that. You shouldn't worry about scaring them off or offending them or coming on too strong. And if that happens, then maybe you realize that your personalities don't clash. And that's another important thing, is that don't feel bad if you don't think that personality-wise you're not going to match up well with that person. That does happen sometimes, and that's an important aspect of the mentoring relationship, is that you get along. And in situations in which you're going to run into people that you don't like, who don't like you, unfortunately that's going to happen, and it's okay that happens, and you realize it and you move on and get somebody else. And don't feel bad about that, and don't take it personally. And mentors and mentees, I think, likewise, don't take it personally when a mentoring relationship just doesn't work out. So again, some of the mistakes that students or mentees do repeatedly that I wish they wouldn't do is that essentially that they don't do those things. That they don't do their homework when they come to see me. They haven't really thought about what they want from me. I want to know what they want from me. That they haven't really done their homework. They're not ready to tell me what are their expectations of me. And that just starts out the relationship on bad footing. If the first time that I meet, it doesn't really seem like you've thought about it very much. And then the other thing that I find that happens as well is that once we begin the mentoring relationship, it changes. Somehow, the things that we talked about and the plans that we made, the student suddenly has different ideas. And that is okay, because as I said, things change along the path, and it's okay when you come to these crossroads where you need to make a switch. But it's when there are major, expectation changes that is a problem. And then the last thing that I would say that is a mistake that mentees make is that they don't communicate to the mentor when they're having these sort of thoughts about, oh, I want to go in a different direction. It goes back to my stories about myself. When I was switching from MD to a different track, it was hard to talk to someone about that. It was difficult to open up and say, I think I made a mistake and I don't want to be a doctor anymore. But you need to do it. You have to communicate with the mentor. I had actually an experience like that recently with a mentee that I have currently, where he wanted suddenly to be a medical writer, actually. And it's like, I didn't find out about it, that he had this desire and that he wanted to kind of explore that as an option for career. I didn't find out about it directly through him. He didn't come to me, so it's very difficult for me to mentor him now on what he is wanting to do if I don't know it. And so I think those are the big mistakes that students make, is that they don't communicate, they aren't clear about the expectations, but those luckily are easy things to correct.
Great, thank you so much, Adela. If you just dialed in, please be sure to mute your phone so that you do not interrupt anybody listening to the webinar. Next, we will hear from June.
So I think sometimes there's some confusion about the difference between an advisor and a mentor, so I want to start just by clarifying those differences. And as I speak, just to make sure we're all on the same page, when I say you or your, I'm generally talking about the student or the mentee. So first of all, let's define the academic advisor. Right? So this person, I want you to think of them as a director. Okay, so in the laboratory, this is the person who is responsible for your research performance. They help you think critically about the science and to prepare presentations and publications. This advisor, the director, generally has, their own agenda, right? It's to further the research of their own lab, to publish, to get grant money. And you, as a student, kind of happen to be just the person who's doing the work. Advisors, as the title implies, they give advice, and the advice is specific to the problem being faced, and it's not necessarily specific to the person facing the problem. So the advice doesn't necessarily consider, a person's specific personal situation, needs, passions, and that sort of thing. Sometimes, if you read about mentoring in businesses, an advisor is often on the payroll, and that means they have a vested interest in the success of the company, and not necessarily the personal success of, like, the CEO. There's also a position in pretty much every academic institution called a career counselor. I don't know how many of you guys have ever, taken advantage of those services, but a career counselor is also a type of director. Right? So this person helps you identify your interests, your aptitude and strengths, and translate them into career goals. I sent a link earlier to Danielle. Maybe you can put that into the chat box. But there's a sort of a nifty Venn diagram that helps you recognize, what is sometimes termed the ikigai, or your reason for being. Yeah, the link is right there. Thank you, Danielle. And you can just pop that up some other time and just kind of look at it and try to figure out, like, where all of these interests and passions in your life lie and how you can, leverage them into a job. Anyway, so the career counselor can help you translate, what makes you tick, right, and turn them into career goals. And once those goals are established, that person can then direct you to resources that you may need to be successful. So a career counselor, different from an academic advisor, a career counselor can work often in terms of sort of like psychological concerns. And issues that they can assist with include issues such as time management or test anxiety or personal issues. And so being a director is not mutually exclusive from being a mentor, but an advisor is not necessarily a mentor and is not required to be a mentor. Okay, and so what is a mentor? Let's define that first. So a mentor is essentially a guide. Right? So this is a person who takes an interest in your future but allows and encourages you to choose your own direction. I think Adela was talking about that as well as Marianne. And so this is a person who says something more like, how can I help you, as opposed to, this is what you must be doing. Right? And a lot of people liken mentors to coaches. Right? A coach understands what motivates you and gives you advice but also support or tutoring. They can push you out of your comfort zone, but they also have your back. A mentor, is primarily motivated by altruism, okay? And it's a desire essentially to see you succeed, right, the mentee. This person does not directly benefit from your success, so your success as a mentee doesn't translate to papers or grant money for the mentor. And so it's this altruistic motivation that allows mentors to have a more holistic view of the mentee that focuses on their personal growth and development. So their job is to teach you how to become a professional in the field. It helps you build a more rapid and successful career progression, serves as a role model, and introduces you, to their network when the time comes for you to do job hunting. And I also just want to, since I've talked about all the roles of the advisors and counselors and mentors, also a little bit about the role of the mentee. The mentee has to bring to the table, and I think Adela talked about this, the mentee has to bring the initiative and the desire to achieve. Like that's their responsibility. They have to know what they want. And to make sure that the relationship with the mentor is beneficial to the mentor as well, show gratitude. Right? Marianne touched on this as well. I like to say, say thank you to the person directly, but also give public credit to those who helped you. And this could be in the form of acknowledgement in a paper or a talk. And just in general, acknowledge that you are where you are because of the support that you've received from other people. I think also as a mentee, you have to keep an open mind, right? You're going to somebody for advice, so you should follow that advice. You can always offer your own perspective, especially, if there are things like generational differences that exist. But also one of the best ways to, thank a mentor is to be successful. And when the time comes in your career, then you could pay it forward and be a mentor to other people.
And finally, we have David.
Well, one thing I wanted to talk about is why mentors have been important for me and what I'd like to give them credit for. And I've had the great fortune of having many mentors, both formal and informal, related to various areas, including how to take good care of patients, how to teach dermatology to trainees, and how to conduct clinical research and mentor others in doing so. One of my main mentors provided me the opportunity for my first dermatologic research project when I was a third-year medical student, and I really appreciated how he gave me general advice how to approach the project, but allowed me autonomy to explore the data for interesting insights, which was very motivating for me, and I think allowed the project to reach greater potential. And then he encouraged me to present these findings at a national meeting, and it actually led me to winning an award at that meeting at a medical student abstract competition. And he was always my most enthusiastic supporter, and I've really always tried to model this encouragement with my mentees. For example, after I won that award, he encouraged me to call my parents and tell them about the award. And not only that, he got on the phone with my parents to tell them about the award and how excited he was about it. And to this day, my parents still remember that phone call, and it made them feel very proud of what I had accomplished. So this same mentor, when I joined the faculty, he made sure to connect me with leaders in the field of medical dermatology, which was very instrumental in my career development and opened up myriad opportunities for my clinical skills, to present, to give lectures nationally and internationally, and to have opportunities to publish my research. And now as I reflect on things, it's interesting to note that as I see patients with complex skin disease or mentor students on research projects, I often reflect on the lessons I learned from this mentor and try to weave them into my clinical practice and in my research endeavors. So another mentor I had taught me about what it means to have a successful career. As I alluded to earlier, at Mayo Clinic we have 3 shields or tenets: patient care, education, and research. And this mentor taught me that to have a fulfilling career, there needs to be what he called a synergy between these shields, and they need to interact with each other. For example, each day in clinic I see patients, and sometimes I need to look at the research to help me decide how to best take care of this patient. And so I ask a question, and that question leads to more questions and may lead to pursuing a research project about a better treatment or diagnosis for that skin disease. And then we publish those findings, and we go present those at lectures nationally, and ultimately we bring that information back to the patient to provide insights for them about the disease and provide better care for them. And so you can also have informal mentors too. One of my colleagues, senior colleagues, is a brilliant clinician, and he cares for patients with the toughest dermatologic diseases. And so when I was new on staff, I keenly observed how he cared for the patients and searched the literature for answers to their issues or for new treatments when needed. And seeing that approach really gave me courage to test the limits of what I thought I was capable of, and in one instance gave me the confidence to prescribe a newly reported and relatively unfamiliar medication for a patient with severe cutaneous lupus. Ultimately, the treatment was very successful for this patient and led us to treat other patients with this, which led us to report these findings in a medical journal and hopefully help other patients around the country and the world. One other question people may wonder about is, why do we mentor? Why is it so rewarding for us? And to get to the bottom line, I mentor others because I want to view them with the same passion and enthusiasm for dermatology and learning that my mentors instilled in me. And also because it's immensely gratifying to mentor others and to help someone achieve their goals and reach their full potential, just like my mentors helped me. Here at Mayo Clinic, we have a lot of quotes from our founders, Drs. Will and Charlie. And one of the sayings was, knowledge is not to be kept to oneself, but to be widely shared with others in order to help our patients. And my mentors selflessly shared their knowledge with me so that I could be the best doctor possible. In the same way, mentoring allows me to continually share my knowledge with colleagues and trainees in this perpetual cycle, ensuring that future generations of dermatologists and people in the medical field will benefit from that knowledge. I wanted to end with a final story about why I love to mentor and how my mentees inspire me and teach me new things every day. So a few years ago, I was caring for a patient with this debilitating itching and burning of her skin. And she also had fibromyalgia. And each time I saw her, she would ask me at the end of the visit, could my itching and burning be related to my fibromyalgia? And each time I replied that that's a very interesting question, but I didn't think so. And sadly, I did not even review the literature to try and see if her insight may have been true. Thankfully, a few months later, I saw her back, and I was working with a very curious and bright first-year dermatology resident. Now, the patient again asked that same question, but fortunately, I didn't make that same mistake because the resident working with me found this question to be very insightful and ultimately explored the medical literature and found that there were plausible mechanisms that could relate her fibromyalgia to her skin itching and burning. And ultimately, this resident's initiative and curiosity led us to publish a Mayo Clinic experience paper on the dermatologic manifestations of fibromyalgia. And this successful endeavor would not have been possible without, one, the patient asking me the question, and two, this bright resident not deflecting the question, but really taking it seriously and exploring the literature for a connection.
Great. Great. Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you to all of the panelists for your insights. At this point, I'd like to open the discussion for the panelists. And one question that has been asked here and via previous submitted questions is, what are some specific traits that mentees can bring to the relationship? Some people are looking specifically in a research setting. Others are looking in a more professional setting as they look to be mentored in other areas. Marianne, I know you've talked a lot about science communication mentoring in June as well. So what are some traits and some characteristics that a mentee needs to think of to be successful in a mentor-mentee relationship? Marianne, I know you've mentored a lot of people in science communication. Would you like to start? The qualities of a good mentee.
Could you repeat that again?
The qualities of a good mentee.
When I mentor someone, I really look for people who are, excited about learning, want to learn, are resourceful, are, follow through, are respectful, pay attention to my time, really set, we set boundaries, we set expectations, and I really like when they follow through. And as David was saying, it's really wonderful to work with students and to work with mentees. Here at Mayo, one of my favorite things is working with the medical students. I love it that they have such a contemporary perspective on today's culture. They teach me a lot, and I think I teach them a lot. So I think having that sort of cooperative learning and collaborative learning with mentees is extremely helpful. But, they really have to follow through on what's set in the expectations and what's set in goals. So active learning, being collaborative, doing anything you can with the mentor and following through.
And Adele, I know you mentioned a few of these points in your introduction. Do you care to elaborate?
Yes, absolutely. I have to say, I think the question was asked about, maybe specifically about research mentoring. And the one thing that I look for, first and foremost, is passion. I look for evidence that the student has passion for research and that they're not just wanting to do it, just to check it out. When they are asking me to be their mentor, that is a step beyond being an advisor. I think June covered really well the difference between an advisor and a mentor. And when you have already gone to an advisor and explored the different possibilities and you say, okay, I want to try research, now you're looking for a mentoring relationship. It's no longer an advising relationship. So now you really have to show the passion. And so I know that sometimes your passions change, that that happened to me. I thought I had passion for medicine, and then I realized I had passion for research, and that's okay. But when I was on the medical path, I had passion for it. At that moment, I really wanted it, and so that's what you got to show. I obviously, along with that passion, once you start on that mentoring relationship, all the things that Marianne said, you have to be all in. You have to be a part of it. That's another big thing that I look for in mentees is that you are an active participant in the mentoring relationship. You're not just wanting to get something from the mentor, but not really actively doing anything, in that relationship. So I really think that that's also important. And sometimes that happens as you go along. I mean, as an undergrad, you do that less, but you learn really quickly, I think, what the process is. So I would say, be passionate, show your passion, and be active in that mentoring.
Echo in on those sentiments. I think enthusiasm is so important, and I think that in turn gets the mentor enthused and passionate. So it's this reciprocal relationship, and it builds the mentor's enthusiasm and passion for working on what they're doing. I think also a spirit of relentless optimism, particularly with research mentoring, because as all of you well know, I know the first time I worked on a paper, I was hoping, we get accepted to the first journal that we get submitted to, and there'll be no revision. That never happens, and to keep up that optimism, if it gets rejected at the first, second, sixth journal, and keep saying, we're going to find a home for this, we're going to find the best home, and to always keep upbeat about things. And part of that's the mentor and doing that with the mentee as well. I think thirdly is good communication skills, both in spoken communication and in written communication. I think those can't be overemphasized for a good mentor-mentee relationship.
If I can sort of pivot from there, so we had a few questions, and I think this is related. So we had a few questions that were submitted earlier that were about motivation, and I'm assuming the questions came from faculty, but the questions primarily were about how do you motivate a student who's not doing their best, or or you don't believe that they're doing their best, and as we talked about, the mentee has to bring their own drive and their own initiative to the table, right? You can't instill in somebody else a desire to achieve. I mean, to me, it's almost like saying, to somebody who doesn't like broccoli, you're going to like broccoli. It doesn't work that way. So you can approach it from in a different way of trying to find out what is the core reason that they're not doing well. Somebody once said to me, graduate school, it weeds out those who can't and those who don't want to. And I think most people, most of the time, can achieve some sort of basic competence in whatever field that they choose. Of course, the brightest stars are the ones who are the most excited about their work. But what do you do, with the duller stars, right? So as long as you believe it's not sheer incompetence that's holding them back, then you can try to find out, what is the problem, right? I mean, maybe a little bit of tough love is useful here, but as the mentor or the advisor in this situation, be prepared to hear that, your research is not that thrilling to them. One of my colleagues likes to joke, it's like being told your baby is ugly, and maybe to some people, the baby is ugly. And so this is where an academic advisor could direct the student to a career counselor. Perhaps the person is still very interested in science, very interested in research, but not as a researcher. There are other careers, and I don't mean that, the pejorative alternative career, the careers where an advanced level of science education is highly valued. These careers include things like policy advisors, journalists, teachers, consultants, intellectual property lawyer, research grant manager, maybe medical editor. And so, I would advise to not categorize students just as lazy. They're unmotivated for some reason. So as an advisor or as a mentor, and you can try to get to the root of why they're not doing well.
And so this kind of feeds into the next question. If a student's thinking of a career transition, how do you convey that to your mentor, which would especially be your research mentor, without hurting that relationship to get you through, the end of your research career? And because that could be one of the reasons for maybe a little bit less motivation for your research, especially as you're thinking about transitioning away from the bench. Would anyone like to?
Well, one thing I think, as long as you work with the principle of honesty and good communication, I think there's nothing to worry about. For instance, if you're working on a research topic with a mentor and you get into it and life circumstances abound and maybe you have too many other things going on, or maybe it's a topic that doesn't interest you, don't be afraid to meet with your mentor and have that conversation and explain to them. I think any good mentor is going to be very understanding and completely understand, be okay with that. It gets tough if you wait till later on and there's a deadline, and one day before the deadline, whether it's a talk or a paper is due, and then say, oh, I can't do this anymore, and then it's challenging for the mentor. So I think just being upfront and open and honest with the mentor, and I think there's nothing to fear if you have a good mentor.
I think, David, what you're saying is so important that we forget to how important communication is to mentoring, and again, to be honest with people and to say what you really think up front. What your expectations are and what you plan to do and how important communication is. Just keeping in touch with the mentor. I've mentored a number of students who couldn't decide whether they wanted to go to medical school or go into journalism or scientific writing. And I knew up front what I was doing because I was hoping eventually that they would be part of my department. But I knew where they were going, and so I wasn't at all upset if they chose medical school. So again, just communicating all the time with your mentor.
Yeah, I'll echo also what David said about being respectful. If you're respectful, what Marianne has talked about respect, I think this is a theme that has come up, and if you're respectful about it, there's nothing to fear, and the mentor is going to understand, and in fact, they're probably going to still try to help you and try to help you to get the resources for this new path that you might want to be going down. And it's the respect, and part of the respect is what David was talking about. Keep in mind that the mentor does have something that they want to get out of the relationship as well, and that you do this in a way that does not damage that very much. You time it right. But if you're open and talking to them about it all along, you can make a plan, right? You can say, okay, well, let's get this paper out. Let's get this project done. I need these results for a grant application that I'm trying to write, and so as long as you're open, communicating, and the two of you are communicating about your needs, and you're doing it in a respectful way, there is nothing to fear. It's really sad that students may be scared to talk about mentors, about these transitions. That should not happen.
So we had one question that I think is really interesting. One person wrote in that they hear a lot from faculty at all stages about the need for mentoring themselves and how to create a culture around mentoring, for our faculty members, as well as students. So does anybody have any thoughts about that? Adela, it looks like you have something to say.
Yeah, I think about this all the time because at every stage of my career, it's a new stage, and I need help. I always am going to need somebody that has been there, done that, and can help me. So I think about it all the time, and I think it's totally okay. Obviously, I'm getting mentoring of a different type now, but I still need mentors. And for example, even in mentoring, if I need mentoring on my mentoring style, that's okay. And I actively seek it out. I try to be true to myself as well and realize where do I have deficiencies, and if one of my deficiencies is in mentoring, then I go seek that out. So I definitely think that we're in a time now where we never stop learning. I'm always going to need role models and mentors. And
if I could say a word or two. So Mayo has experimented with something that they call peer mentoring. I personally have not participated in this program, but I've done a lot of reading about it. And it's basically, they've taken, and the focus when Mayo was doing the trials was on female professors, but they were taking women who are at either the instructor or assistant professor level, making them into small groups, and like doing a lot of the sort of the organization and making sure that everyone had, an objective, to do a study, to publish one or two things or apply for a grant, and they would meet together, read each other's drafts, and this program went on for a number of years, and my understanding was I was very successful. And so if you are having trouble identifying a senior person, you know, or you just can't seem to get somebody who is fitting, you know, the needs that you have, get together with some of your, you know, your co-faculty, you know, similar level, and work together. You could be each other, you know, it's sort of like the equivalent of a study buddy, you know, back in high school or graduate school, you know, but somebody who can help you at that stage as well. It doesn't always have to be somebody who is ahead of you.
One thing along these lines, and I agree this is so important, mentoring for faculty, and I think that can help mentors and mentees is to keep a spirit of humility about our daily work and appreciate what we don't know, because at least I feel more days than not that there's so much I don't know, and some days I feel like I know nothing. And so I think that encourage you to continually learn and to seek advice of others. And senior colleagues, if they keep that spirit too, they will gravitate towards more junior colleagues, and a natural mentoring relationship, I think, will occur. Also being open to new ideas and career paths. I'm sure many of the panelists, you know, they weren't anticipating the career twist that they took, and it was on, you know, just taking a chance on something, whether it's a research idea or a project or a new role, and then you find out you love it and you go down that path. One thing I found helpful for finding mentoring for faculty is to, if you develop a niche, whether it's a clinical or research niche, then become a part of an organization that has an interest in that niche, and then the senior members or colleagues of that organization will naturally take you under their wing. For instance, this rheumatologic dermatology society that my mentor got me involved with as a junior faculty, mentorship from that group then naturally took off, and it helped my confidence in my clinical skills. It gave me opportunities to speak nationally, do visiting professorships, and publish articles. So it was great, and it just happened organically due to joining that group and having like-minded individuals.
Great, thank you. Well, it is 12. Oh, did you have something to say, Adela? Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one last thing because it reminded me when I was listening to June's comments, is that this idea of peer mentoring and peer coaching is actually something that's taken off. We do a lot of peer coaching approaches in the programs that I work with, and it's at all levels. We have students peer coach each other. We have faculty peer coach each other, and that's a totally different approach. It's not mentoring; it's support group. It's being there for one another and sharing the experiences, and I think that's a really important aspect as well to support in the career path.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. It's 12:55. So I am going to start wrapping up our discussion. Do any of the panelists have any final words that you would like to share with the group? Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us today. You can find a number of additional resources for mentoring. You can find a number of additional resources for mentoring on the ASBMB webpage, as well as through ASBMB Today, the Society's monthly news magazine. You can find articles relevant to today's discussion on the ASBMB Today website under the mentoring collection. I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists for having this wonderful discussion. We're sorry that we couldn't answer all of the questions, but we're grateful for the insight you were able to give us on this webinar. The ASBMB provides professional development programs based on your needs, and we hope you will take some time to fill out a short survey about this webinar. The survey will be available upon meeting exit and via an email you will receive at the conclusion of the webinar. Have a great day.